All right. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come today. We're going to talk about how to elevate your business through data mining. Let me share with you a little bit about who I am. My name is Daniel Meyer, or I go by Dan. I have a passion for all things to do with technology and data. I always have my entire life, and that's kind of led me to pursue a career as somebody who constantly looks for ways to use technology to help businesses level up or improve what they do, as well as looking for opportunities to work with people who want to personally get better at working with data and technology. So long story short, if you don't mind, I'll tell you my story real quick. It's all about being in the right place at the right time. So I went to college to be a teacher. I actually have a master's in education. I was teaching at a school in California, and mid-year the school went bankrupt, unfortunately. And so I was out of a job, and I wanted to get another teaching job, but because it was mid-school year, it'd be hard to find another teaching job. So I took a job with Wells Fargo in their customer service call center, thinking to be a temporary job. I would just work there for a few months until I can find another teaching job. However, when I got to Wells Fargo, I found I had a skill that not a lot of my peers in the supervisor group had. I knew how to use Excel, and because I could use Excel, I could make reports and I could do all kinds of analysis and stuff, and that led to, hey Dan, do this, hey Dan, do this. Next thing you know, it's 15 years later, I never went back to teach. I kept working for Wells Fargo and getting new opportunities to get promoted and do new things, where I was able to constantly learn more and more about all these different things that I'll talk about today, like data mining. After doing a lot of big projects for Wells Fargo and being with the bank for 15 years, I started hitting my head on a glass ceiling. And within the bank, and within banks in general, at least back 10 years ago, it's pretty hard to move up into senior management without an MBA. I have a master's in education, not a master's in business administration. That difference was stopping me from getting some of these positions. So I decided to leave the bank and set up my own business. So I took all this knowledge I got from Wells Fargo, and I set up my own business to be able to do consulting and training. Through a couple different, again, long story short, I ended up doing most of the work the last several years in Southeast Asia, being based in the Philippines and working in Vietnam, working in Singapore, working in Malaysia, doing a lot of what I had learned at Wells Fargo, helping companies figure out how to level up using data, how to get better at understanding customer behavior, being able to predict different things, being able to figure out how to use all types of analysis and data science. And then as I did that, I started becoming more and more adept at sharing my knowledge with people, and that led me here today, working with Power Team. Besides working in Southeast Asia, I do a lot of consulting and training here in the US. I'm actually based in Florida, but I spend most of my time on the road. And so that's my long story short. So my point is that anyone can get into this kind of stuff. You don't have to have an IT or computer science background to get good with data. I'm proof of that. My company, Sonic Analytics, just a little bit about what I've done in the last 8 years since I established the company. I've trained almost 200 companies, over 8,000 analysts. I've worked on 50 big data projects. This is my favorite thing to do. This is my passion in life. I like to be able to talk to people about what's going on in their business or their career and how they can use data technology to evolve. So when I'm speaking with student groups, doing training classes, whatever I'm doing, this is really a point where I'm at that sweet spot in life where I'm good at something, I enjoy doing it, and I get paid for it. So I hope that if technology and data are things that you want to do, you'll be able to get to that point as well. The cool thing about what I do is the clients are everywhere. There are businesses all over the world that need data, that need to figure out how to make more use of their data, and need to figure out how to use that data and the analysis that comes with the data to be able to be more successful. So pretty much every industry, every size company, everywhere is trying to figure out how to level up with their data. Even the big companies, you look at like Amazon and Google and Microsoft. Amazon just announced recently that they're going to spend $700 million on upskill training their workforce. They have a lot of people who have jobs that are very manual. that eventually will be replaced by machines. But they don't want to just lose those employees. They want to upskill train them to be able to do other more tech-centric jobs. There's two reasons to do this. It's cheaper to retrain an employee versus bringing in a new employee. And there's not enough people out there that can do it already. We have a shortage right now across the planet in people that have tech skills. There's a reason why the US, majority of our engineers and a lot of our companies are from China and India, because there's not enough people that get those degrees here in the US. We're producing a lot of people that have skills that don't fit the labor market. So this is something that why I do what I do, to be able to help people figure out how to level up their business and themselves. Before I go on though, I want to learn a little bit about you guys. I'd like you to just quickly tell me who you are, what you do for a living, and what did you come here today for? What did you want to learn? And most importantly, what makes you awesome? What makes you somebody who wants to work with data? What is it that it makes you feel excited? So we'll just start with Paul and just quickly share these 4 points. Paul, please.
Sure. I'm Paul Baraz. I do business consulting, mainly sales training for a living. I want to learn more about how to use the data I have available to me to generate some leads. What makes me awesome? I'm the best in the world at what I do. I'm the best known.
All right. Well, that makes you awesome. So very good. Cool.
I'm Selena. Go to school. I'm a student and I work. What I do for a living: work and go to school.
Okay.
What do I want to learn today? I want to learn about data, a more deeper, more information, and what I can take out of it. What makes me awesome? I want to be a millionaire by 25.
There you go. That's a very awesome goal. Cool. In the back there is Hassan, please.
My name is Hassan. I'm a licensed cosmetologist, licensed barber, and a barber teacher, actually. What I want to learn today, I'm just looking for this kind of new techniques to try to get more leads. Kind of also I like to go to things like this and learn, so I could kind of pass them down to my students as well too. We're in an age of technology
Yes.
and data. So I like to learn new innovative things that I could pass down to the students instead of just the old fashioned kind of way, I want to say. And what makes me awesome is that I love what I do.
Okay. Great. That's perfect. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. So I used to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and in the past 2 years, I've been helping my uncle's financial consulting company, expand and find new clients in Chicagoland. And I want to network today and learn more about data, artificial intelligence, and stuff. So I've been in the country only for 5.5 years. So I was born in China, so I think I've been doing very well in this country. That makes me feel proud of myself.
Good.
Yeah, I own a house here and expand a network and start my own entrepreneur business for 3 years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Okay. And finally, Sophia.
Sophia Clay. I work at a bank, and I'm a lead engineer where I actually work with our technology and business teams. I teach them, coach them on how to new tools, technology processes in the technology world. Very passionate about technology, especially new technology, anything that's going to accelerate and innovate new ideas within our business, within my bank. I'm very passionate about coaching and training that next generation of technologists.
Awesome. Great. That's awesome. So give yourself a round of applause. We all are awesome, right? And the cool thing about being here today is this makes you awesome because I'll share a secret with you. Nerds make more money.
Yeah,
Right?
I do.
You look at the top companies in the world, who they run by? A bunch of nerds, right? So there you go. So we're all here today because we want to get a piece of that action, right? We want to figure out how to get more value out of technology. So let me just share a few ground rules or house rules, real simply. Make sure that you're respectful of each other, right? We all have different backgrounds, and I'm not thinking we're going to get in a fight or anything, but we don't all know the same stuff, right? We come from different places. Be bold, ask some questions. Don't just sit there and listen. Ask questions and engage. This is the kind of stuff where you have to let me know what you want to learn so I can tell you what you need to know. I can just, go off the presentation, but it's going to be much more valuable if it's interactive. Be innovative. Don't be stuck in your box you're in now. Think about what you can do 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road. The thing with technology is it's always moving so fast that if we just plan right now for how we're doing things now, it's going to be obsolete in a matter of months or if not years, right? So think innovatively. I'm going to throw a lot of content. It may cause a few of you to get a little overwhelmed, even cause a nosebleed. If it happens, I apologize. But that's my style. Lots and lots of content. I'm going to give you a buffet of ideas and technologies and softwares and things you can do. Each one of you can pick and choose what you want to do, because the thing with things like data mining is that there's no two companies that apply it the exact same way. Everyone has a different approach to how they use the data in their business. So you have to kind of pick and choose what you want to be able to do. All right, sound good? Any questions? Okay. So quick survey by show of hands, just to help me get an idea of who, what your backgrounds are when it comes to technology. Don't feel shy if you don't raise your hand to a lot of this kind of stuff. But how many of you are using something besides Microsoft Excel? Use other tools besides Excel to do data, to work with data. Okay? Most companies still use Excel to manage their data, to do their analysis. It's still by far and away the backbone of any kind of data mining is in Excel. But there are other tools out there, so I'd like to get a sense of who's using some other tools. In addition, how many of you work on or maintain on what's called a business dashboard? Have you ever heard of a business dashboard? All right, Sophia has. If you haven't, we'll talk about it a little bit later, right? What about predictive models? All right, we got, Sophia's she's right there where she wants to be. We just got to figure out how to give you a few things to get to the next level. And finally, data storytelling. These are three concepts that I talk about a lot that are important to be able to have involved in your business if you're going to maximize the data in your business. You don't have to actually be able to do dashboards and models and storytelling yourself, but you have to have that kind of stuff ingrained in what's happening at some level in the business. So with that in mind, we'll talk about data mining. Now, data mining is simply just this. It's extracting information that has value and bringing it to an end user. So there are a lot of ways of data mining. We'll talk about a few in more detail. There are some that are manual, some that are technology driven. But basically data mining is taking information out of data, extracting just what you need to be able to make better decisions and to be able to look at things from a perspective of, is this a good opportunity or is this a risky opportunity? Analyzing stuff, predicting customer behavior, trying to figure out what customers want before they even know they want it. This kind of stuff all starts with data mining. Why is it important? Well, they say that data is the new oil. And I mentioned before that nerds make more money. Well, if you look at the top companies in the world as far as valuation, as far as how much money they're worth, they're all tech companies. And they've all been around for like maybe 20 years, more likely 15, 10 years. I mean, Google, Facebook, these companies have revolutionized the way business is done because they have data. And data is now more valuable of a commodity than oil. How many of you saw that Netflix documentary that came out a couple weeks ago called The Great Hack? You hear about it? Where it talked about how one company hacked a bunch of Facebook user data that was used to help influence the elections and Brexit and in the presidential election in 2016. This kind of stuff is the new normal. We live in a world of information that has value. And people are even starting to ask, what is my value worth? Every day, Facebook is doing things with my data. Now, Facebook has a deal. I can use Facebook for free if I give them my data. And they can do that with that data pretty much what they want. They can sell it, they can aggregate it, they can even extract your friend's data and do things with that. So data is definitely a valuable commodity. So the ability to mine it is a super important skill. In fact, according to Bain, a consulting firm, the value of mining data is 2 times more likely to be in the top quartile financial performance if companies are mining data. 3 times more likely to execute decisions as intended, 5 times more likely to make decisions faster. I could go on and on and on. There are thousands of bullet points that talk about reasons why getting involved with data mining is so important. But let me give you an example, an actual thing we can all understand. How many of you are familiar with Waze? Right? So Waze is a GPS app that gives you directions, point-to-point directions, right? So you want to take Uber or Lyft, you're using the same technology that Waze created. And what it basically does is it tells you how long it will take you to get from point A to point B. It won't just tell you how long it will take you, it will tell you what you should do en route if things change. And it factors in a lot of data points. Think about all the data that flows into these processing centers that Waze and Uber and Lyft use. They look at real-time traffic information coming from users. They combine that with weather information. They combine that with police reports, with construction activity, with infrastructure projects, with all this stuff happening. They do that in real time in nanoseconds. Because if it didn't happen in real time, it wouldn't be useful. There still might be some value to knowing how to get from point A to point B. But if it's not real time, it's kind of a guess, and it could cause a lot of frustration. But now we're able to plan our time better, plan our routes, figure out what we're going to do. And we put in a system like Uber or Lyft, we even know how much it's going to cost. And we can do all this simply through our phone. This is revolutionary. I mean, think about if you were a company who made maps 10 years ago, where are you now? Probably not in business anymore, right? Think about how this has completely disrupted the taxi industry. Taxis used to dominate transportation from point to point from places like downtown Chicago to the airport, right? Now, most taxi drivers also use Lyft or Uber, right? The idea of going and standing in a corner and hailing a taxi is very rare nowadays. That's disruption on a massive scale. So if you were using maps or you were a taxi driver, your business has been disrupted by the ability to take data, mine it, and do things with it to add value to your customer. Make sense? So here's the problem, though, with most companies' approach to data mining, is we have all this data. We're capturing some of it, but the part we really need, the information, is not really useful to us. So think about this. This is noise, right? This is all the data available to us. This is the data we capture, and this is just the part that we can use. So we have to align this better. We have to make sure that the data that we're capturing lines up with what we really need for decision making. This is where you have to really start applying a lot of processes to be able to fine-tune your approach to mining data. It's complicated because there's what we call the 5 V's of big data. Not to get too technical, but when you look at data, we all know about volume, big data, size of data, massive amounts of information that we have to process every day. On top of that, we get data faster and faster all the time. We live in a world where, yeah, sure, go ahead. In fact, there'll be a point where you can download, or send you a way to download it. So you can get your data in real time. The value of data is no longer just numbers. It's no longer just ones and zeros that fit into code. It's now things that you see on social media, on Facebook, on all kinds of models that are built that are data-driven, that aren't something you can easily put into a spreadsheet. We have to worry about whether data is real or not. We live in an era of fake news. It's reality. Is this data where you're going to use data we should trust? And then the variety. How much data is structured versus what we call unstructured, meaning it's not something that easily fits into a spreadsheet. You have all these V's of data complicating it. So when you want to figure out how to mine massive amounts of data, you got to ask yourself questions around these as well. I'll give you an example. Most of us look at our data at work, and we do it in an old-fashioned process, as compared to how we look at our data in our personal lives. In our personal lives, we use apps like Waze and Uber and Facebook and Netflix and on and on and on that give us real-time stuff like this. But we go to work, and more often than not, most of the things we do at work are things that happen in batches, that happen month in, that happen when systems are updated, that happen when we have access to certain databases or data sources. It's not happening as quickly in our personal lives as it does. I mean, it's not happening quickly in our business lives as in our personal lives. Now, there are some companies that are really, really good about using their data, but they're few and far between. This is a concern. Why are the tech titans doing this stuff and selling to us for our personal consumption, but why are businesses on a large scale not doing the same thing? It's a question we have to figure out. All right, one more slide to kind of put the foundation. Analytics is a process. When you analyze data, when you're looking for answers in data that you get when you mine it, you have to first inspect the data and make sure it's the right data. So when we're mining data, we can't just take everything. We have to make sure it's what we want. It's the idea of aligning the information that we're extracting, what we really need, versus taking a bunch of noise. And then when we get our data, a lot of times we have to clean data. One of the killers to a lot of companies being able to do things real time is that their data processes are very manual when it comes to cleaning data. A lot of people actually have to cut and paste things in Excel and clean it up manually, fixing typos, reformatting information, putting in a new column in to break apart a column that has first name, last name into separate columns, all this kind of stuff. A lot of companies are still doing it manually. They're not automating that process, which makes the ability to actually transform data, all this stuff, and funnel it to just what you need, can also be pretty time consuming. So data mining really is ways that you can do all this stuff on a large scale by using tools and techniques that aren't manually driven. Once you have that, then you can model data to help you figure out what you want to do with it. A very simple way to build a model is a pivot table. If you're familiar with pivot tables in Excel, that's the most basic elementary way to model data, right? To look at things in the aggregate. There's much more complicated models that build predictive analytics, like Waze. Waze predicts which way you should go home every day, and it will change every day based on variables. You can go down on the street corner right now and get a Lyft ride home, and you do it 5 days in a row, it's not likely that you'll go the exact same route all 5 days, even if you leave at the same time. The factors will cause things to change, and the ability to predict which route you should go is based on the models that Lyft and Uber are using. Once you're able to model your data, you discover patterns, you look for trends, you look for risks, you look for opportunities. This is where a lot of people spend their analysis, right? And even the analysis phase can be quite intimidating if you're not using a lot of ways to automate your data, if you're doing things through manual processes. And then finally, you get to the point where you want to make suggestions. You want to feed your analysis of the data to your decision makers so they can make decisions, so they can decide what to do. They can take a strategy. This whole process has to be well engineered to work. If it's not, if there's problems in this process, then it's going to be hard to really effectively mine data. So whether you're working for a massive, huge company with lots of data or a small business, you still have to apply the same process. This process is universal across any business that's trying to extract value out of data. Whatever data it mines has to be refined ultimately to be able to be used. So you could even imagine it's like the process in oil, right? You find the oil wells, you clean up the oil to turn it into gasoline, you send it to your distributors based on who needs what. It gets out there, you start filling your car, and then finally you get to go, right? So the idea of refining data is like oil that way. All right, so at this point, we're going to focus on 3 different things to kind of give you guys some topics to follow up on for your self-learning, as well as things you can apply. And if you want to get a copy of this presentation, so you don't have to keep taking pictures, you can text data to 26786 right now, and that will reply back with a link to the PDF of this presentation. So I'm trusting you guys aren't going to just take that and run. You're going to stay for the rest of the presentation, but if you want it for future reference, you have it, right? Cool. So we're going to talk about how to govern your data. It offers a good data governance, how to delegate or automate manual work, and how to influence customer behavior and the ultimate goal. And we're going to cover each topic in about 5 or 6 minutes. We could spend a whole 2 days on each topic if we have the time, but we don't. So I'm going to give you the high level. Everyone get that? 26786 data? Okay. All right. It starts with good data governance. Our challenge. Why do so few companies use data mining and not move towards AI? Why are people stumbling or stuck and not using artificial intelligence? What is it about mining all this data that's slowing them down? Anybody have any thoughts? Why are more companies not doing what Lyft and Uber do?
It's a long process, maybe?
It's a process, right? You take a time to implement. Yeah. What else? Could be expensive, right?
Yeah.
It can just be that you don't have the technology skills. You don't have people that can do it, right? It can be kind of scary. Well, data governance is the processes, the technology, and the people that run data in the business. So this is the rules that govern that flow of data I showed you before. If you have good data governance, then you should be able to figure out how to maximize or optimize that data. This is why I start with this, because a lot of companies don't have good data governance. It's a term that most companies wouldn't even know what to do with, data governance. But you think about the meaning behind it, how do you govern the use of your data? It helps you get on the same page and work towards a common strategy. One of the most common examples of good data governance comes from the idea of a data lake. If you imagine data is like water, the way water flows through an ecosystem, bringing life to the ecosystem, data does the same thing to a business. Data flows through a business, and different parts of the business will survive if they have the right data. If they don't have the right data, they can have trouble. Real quick, a data lake, and this is my avatar, Walter, he's in a lot of my slides. It's a storage repository that holds a vast amount of raw data, right? Your data lake has to be where you can do what you want. So if you know that you want to use your data lake to fish for a certain type of fish, meaning a certain type of data, you know what bait to use, you know what hook to use, you know where in the lake to go get it. All that intelligence that Walter has to get that fish is because there's good data governance around the data, so he doesn't waste his time going out and fishing and coming home empty-handed. Make sense? A really well-refined data lake is called a data reservoir, where you can do more than just fish in it. It can run your whole business. And your data should be structured in ways that allow you to do multiple things with it. This is where good data governance comes in handy. Again, I'm not going to go too much in detail about how to actually do this, but you can follow up on your own. You all have the presentation to refer back to. The biggest challenge with good data governance is when we have data silos. As IBM puts it, the most common challenge associated with big data is fundamental, even traditional information integration problems. Silos. Data gets stuck. People don't share. Different parts of a business, data's not compatible. For example, maybe you have all your accounting data in Excel, and you have all your sales data in a customer relationship management software, and you have all your HR data in an HR database. And none of these things communicate, none talk to each other. So whenever you have to do something to look at a big picture project of the business, and you're trying to compare or figure out how to correlate cause and effect between what's happening with customer retention and employee engagement, you can't do it in one database. You've got to extract things from multiple places and bring it together. This kind of silos is what kills a lot of companies' ability to really effectively do things like mining. And you end up with what we call a data swamp, where your data can't be free-flowing. It clogs up, it gets stuck, and then it could even become a monster and eat you. As an analyst, I've had this experience where I felt like my data was trying to kill me because I couldn't figure out how to get it connected. So some quick tips on good data governance. Assign a data steward, someone responsible for making sure the data comes in is well stored, well organized. Prioritize data entry is important. Don't undervalue the importance of entering good, clean data the first time. And so I'm not going to go through everything for time's sake, but you have these tips in the PDF to refer to. Real quickly, I'm going to walk you through an example of a case study. I have 3 case studies in here. I'm only going to go deeply into the first one, Coffee Bean. Coffee Bean is a tea leaf is an LA-based coffee chain that competes with Starbucks. I don't think they have any locations here in Chicago, right? Mainly on the West Coast. I work with Coffee Bean because I did a training one time, and a couple analysts from Coffee Bean came up to me during the training and said, "Hey, Daniel, we're having trouble with our reporting. Our boss wants us to figure out why certain locations have low coffee sales, and we can't figure that out based on data we have." And they're looking at store-by-store data showing how much coffee is sold per store, and they can tell which stores have low coffee sales, but they can't figure out why. There's nothing in the data they're looking at that would give them definitive information about what it is that's causing them to have low sales. So they're struggling. So I had them go through an exercise, and we started looking at the different data points in Coffee Bean, and what we came up with was kind of mapping out the different data they had, where it was being stored, the people involved, and the audience it went to help kind of identify where these silos were that were causing their data environment to become swampy. And there were things like certain data was in certain formats that wasn't able to easily transfer to their database. They actually had to build a new database to bring in all the different data points and put them through a process that would allow them to extract information and build their reports so they can then share to the different parts of the business. The management team, they found out 2 of the causes for Coffee Bean's low coffee sales were they weren't marketing themselves very well. They were marketing themselves as a coffee provider in a world where coffee's starting to wane as far as like a drink of choice. They weren't really pushing healthier teas. They weren't pushing milk tea or pearl tea or any kind of those fruity Asian drinks. They weren't looking for anything that would differentiate themselves from Starbucks or Pete's or any other coffee company. So it was a marketing problem and then a training problem. Their staff were not well versed in how to sell coffee. As simple as it may sound, they weren't trying to always upsell the customer, to get the customer to, do you want coffee with that? Do you want to, to upgrade your coffee, that kind of stuff. So they identified through all their data through this process the cause. They built new reports to do it. But to be able to get to this solution, they had to redefine their entire data lake in a way that they could look at it and figure out what was going on. Again, this is like a 3-minute version of the case study, but basically the point is when you have a business question that you can't easily answer with the data you have, and you're going to go out and get more data to help you answer it, you want to have good data governance in place so that you're building a system that works and not putting things together that just cause more of the same problem. All right, so there's an exercise I would normally do if we had more time where we would actually go through and do this. You have the PDF. I encourage you to do this when you get back to your office or at home. Think of a list, make a list of all the ways data comes into your business. Where is it stored? How easy is it to access? Who has access to it? And then once you have access to it, how do you share it? What's your audience? Look for those places where there's silos that are causing swampiness. Identify those, fix those. This will help your data mining process be much more efficient. So you're not just mining everything, you're mining exactly what you need to answer a question, like the coffee bean guys did. They didn't have to go out and look at everything. Once they figured out what they needed to identify what was causing low coffee sales, they could target that and just look at that data without having to go pull the whole universe back to decide what to do. Okay? All right. So next thing I'll talk about real quick. Any questions on the coffee bean scenario? Everyone okay with that? All right, so you have to be able to either delegate or automate. When it comes to data mining, when it comes to what you're doing, if you're doing it by yourself, if you have people in your business manually pulling data, putting it in Excel, manually manipulating the data in Excel to extract insights, if that's your process currently, to be scalable, to be survivable, you're going to have to find ways to automate that. If you can't automate it, to delegate it. Manual data mining is time-consuming, mundane, and a waste of talent and resources. This is the biggest reason why there's burnout among people that do this kind of stuff for a profession. If you're an analyst or a data scientist, and this is your full-time thing, the thing that causes the most stress in those environments are having to apply manual processes because the data governance is so bad that there's no easy workarounds, and they don't have the ability to bring in technology to automate stuff. Now, if you're able to automate stuff, you can start doing machine learning. You start teaching a machine how to mine the data. I'll give you a quick example of how that works. Machine learning is basically when you have data, you push it through a machine that gives you predictions of what you should do. The best example to illustrate that is Netflix. Netflix has an engine that pushes to you what you want to watch. Now, it's not always perfect. There's always going to be a few things that are going to pop up in your feed that aren't something you're going to watch, but more often than not, you're going to find that the things it's trying to tell you to watch are things you would have watched anyway. And it's doing that based on every time you watch something, every time someone who fits the same demographic as you, everyone who's in the same geographic location as you, every time someone who is in your circle of people that have access to your account, all that data is constantly pushed through a machine and refined over and over again to be able to tell you the top 10 for you, right? Now, I don't know how, oh, this is my son, that's why Power Rangers on there for me, right? But Breaking Bad, Mad Men, two of my favorite shows of all time, that it's starting to show, it knows me pretty well. And then of course my son, Power Rangers and Rango, it's gonna show what he watches on my profile as well. But anyway, that's an example of how data is mined on a massive scale to be able to help a business. And can you imagine trying to do this without machines? Could you imagine how many people would take Netflix to employ to be able to look at everyone's profiles and then assign values to each profile? It'd be a nightmare, right? So let me tell you about the first time I got involved with this kind of stuff, right? So the first time I actually worked on a project that involved machine learning artificial intelligence. It's for a company called Invaluable. Invaluable is a company based in Boston, this online auction warehouse, right? When they first launched their business, they had to have people manually tag or keyword pictures to go on the website. So this is an 18th century Chinese blue and white vase, right? Picture of it. To get this description, somebody had to look at that picture, look it up, and keyword it, right? And Invaluable was employing a lot of people to do this. Now they knew that that was not sustainable. As their business grew, they wanted to be able to move towards machine learning to solve this problem. So this is not exactly my favorite part of my career, but this is something that I will share with you because it's reality. We employed 60 people on a project knowing full well that those 60 people would not keep those jobs very long. We went out there and had these people tag pictures of millions of items, and every time we did, it taught a machine what was being assigned to what. And eventually the machine was able to auto-tag things. So the 60 people went down to 20. So 40 of the people lost their jobs, and 20 people went from tagging things to QAing what the auto-tagger was tagging. So yeah, it's sad. It sucks. They lost their jobs. But it made Invaluable much more profitable. They were able to save $200,000 a year in employee salaries to be able to do this. So that's the future, right? It's not like we can turn it back. We're not going to go back to a point where we're going to have a lot of manual processes. And companies that do this kind of stuff are going to survive. So that's just an example of the time I got involved in doing AI. I'm going to skip through these slides because of time, because lunch is already here. But I do a workshop if you want to ever get more information about this. I'll spend a day with people that want to sign up for the workshop that will come and go through this entire presentation, but blown out over 8 hours instead of less than 1. And we'll talk about all these different aspects to make sure that your business has the right level of maturity with analytics and how you can level up or get more mature. Talk about the different data families and skills needed to be able to do data mining. Talk about what process to automate. I'll talk about some tips on how to visualize data, how to do data storytelling, talk about customer behaviors that we can influence. And I have like 10 spots left for the next training. It's going to be in Orlando, December 5th. If you want to fly to Orlando, you can go see Mickey while you're with me for a day. So that's an option. I'm going to talk about these last slides real quick, and then we'll break for lunch. So influencing customer behavior. This is why I really enjoy what I get to do, because you get to understand why people do what they do, and you get to influence it. Now, when I say that, it's kind of scary, right? I don't want to sound like the mad scientist who's going to be able to influence you in your decision makings, but that's what's happening all around us all the time. So we either get involved with it and figure out how to use it, or we just get used by it. That's kind of how I look at it with businesses. Who are your core customers? How well do you know them? And the comparison is, do you know your customers as well as Amazon knows its customers? Because Amazon's freaking scary when you think about it. Amazon knows exactly what I need. And they send me emails before I even know I really wanted it. But once I get that email, I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. I want to get that, right? And they know that because they look at my data constantly and refine their mining procedures to be able to pinpoint it. And then what's even scarier is I'm on Amazon and they sent me this email saying there's this hot new book on artificial intelligence that I want to buy, which I didn't even know was out yet, but once I see the email, I want to buy it. So I go to Amazon, I look at it, and I go, well, I'll put it in my cart for now, I'll save it. And then I'm on Facebook, and 2 minutes later, in the middle of my news feed, pops up that same book, right?
How did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what we're dealing with, right? That's the reality of now, not the future, but now. So yes, we're not Amazon. We can't do what Amazon does right away, but we got to start making steps in that direction. If we don't, we're going to get crushed. So the other thing to talk about in my trainings, which I'll give you a brief little sample here, visual learning is a key part of how we educate and influence our audience. Whether that be management, when we're showing them information to make decisions in our company, whether that be ourselves as decision makers, or whether that be our customers. How do we influence them using learning? And there's a whole science to visual learning and data visualization. Also an art. In fact, I think that visualizing data is one of the coolest art forms in the world. I can't paint, I can't draw, I can barely scribble. I mean, I have the worst handwriting in the world. But pie charts, Yeah, I can make a Mona Lisa out of pie charts, right? The Mona Lisa of pie charts. This is what leads us to business dashboards. This is a key technology that if your company's not using business dashboards to look at your data, if you're still using Excel and PowerPoint, you're a dinosaur. Business dashboards have been around for about 10 years now, and they're ways that you take information and you give your management team and decision makers the KPIs, the key performance indicators they want to look at in the palm of their hands. The idea is that if a decision maker, an owner, a boss, they should be able to be at the beach or on a golf course or whatever, pick up their phone, look at the dashboard, know what's going on back in the office. And if these KPIs, these key indicators, are red or negative, then they can do something right away. They don't have to wait to go back to the office on Monday morning and log into their system to see if they can fix what happened over the weekend. That's where businesses need to be going on business dashboards. There's some great tips that I'll talk about on my training about business dashboards, about how you should design it. So it's an important way to visualize data, so you see what's important first. This is the whole science part behind visualization of data. I talk about different tips and what visuals to use, what visuals. I get this question a lot. When should I use a pie chart or a line chart or a bar chart? Now, people know how to do that. If you use Excel, you probably know how to make a pie chart, a line chart, a bar chart. But that's like 4 different types of visuals. There's like 64 different visuals in Excel. Most of us don't use beyond the first 4. We don't do scatter plots. We don't do things on an XY axis. We don't, because they're complicated. They're hard. But once you learn them, you can find there's a value in using these right visuals to be able to influence people the right way.
So what do you use to determine which chart?
So I have a bunch of information I've learned from other experts as well as from my own experience where I'll share. For example, I'll give you one of the tips. You should never use a pie chart if you have more than 3 slices. 3 slices is the maximum you should use in a pie chart. If you start putting more than 3 slices, the pie chart's not going to be easy to make sense of. Especially when you have a pie chart with like 7, 8, 9 slices, and they're different colors, and some of the slices are almost the same size. You look at that, and you know what it looks like because you made it. You know the data behind that pie chart. To you, you're like, oh yeah, that it's 7% here and 6% here. 7% is bigger. I can see it. I know it because I built it. But you put that in front of an audience, and they're not going to tell the difference. They're going to spend time trying to figure out what you were trying to determine in that pie chart. Or when you use visualizations, like you should always have white background with dark blue, dark red, black text. You should never invert it. You should never, ever, ever, ever use visuals that have light text on a dark background. Because that's how we learn. We read books from day one where most of the books we have read are dark text on a white background. Eye charts are that way. That's how the brain works. When we do the opposite, we confuse the heck out of the brain. And we cause cognitive dissonance in our audience. And when we're doing that, we can render our entire presentation of data ineffective. Because while we tell people what we see, and we're clear on it, what they're looking at causes their brain to freeze up and think about, well, what does that mean? And once that brain locks on something that doesn't make sense to them, they block out everything you say after. So if you're going through a series of data points in a presentation and you lost your audience in the first one, they won't hear anything you said until they can make sense of it. And this kind of stuff is the science behind it, right? And this is what most people don't know how to do. This is why in part of my training I cover this topic. Now, one more thing. I mentioned automate or outsource, right? So you want to be able to automate or outsource. You want to look for, and this is the classic Eisenhower decision matrix. You delegate or automate things that are not important and are not urgent, right? If they're completely not urgent, not important, you can even delete them. But for the most part, things that are not important and not urgent, or they are urgent but they're not important, you would want to look for ways to delegate that stuff. Now, you can delegate that stuff the traditional way by hiring more staff, or another traditional way is to outsource it, or you can automate it. And those are kind of the ways you can go about that. If you want to automate, there's great places out there to go. This is just one example. And I talk about a lot of different applications and tools. There's this one called Inzeta. They're an AI business intelligence company out of Tampa. I've worked with them before. They're pretty amazing. They're one of dozens of companies I've worked with that I could help you figure out how to get tied up with if you want to be able to automate some of the stuff in your process. So this is an example there I give you. Last case study I'll talk about, and then we'll take lunch. So customer behavior influencing is what I think is the coolest thing, the scariest thing, but the coolest thing about what I do. And I'll tell you about the first time I actually ever did this in what we call data storytelling. And data storytelling is using data to build a narrative to influence a decision making. And so when I was working for Wells Fargo back in 2008, in the financial crisis, there was a bank called Wachovia. Wachovia was a bank that was based in the East Coast. Wells Fargo was a West Coast-based bank. At the time of the financial crisis, Wachovia went bankrupt. Wachovia had branches in the state of Florida. Wells Fargo at the time did not have any branches in Florida. So Wells Fargo bought Wachovia, primarily for the branches in states Wells Fargo wasn't in at the time. Now, at the part of the bank I was working for then, back in the late 2000s, I was working for our money transfer business, our remittance service, where people could send money to their loved ones overseas, right? So you have a lot of people that come to the U.S. to work, they come here to work, and they send money back to their families back home to support their families, right? So Florida is a very immigrant-heavy state. There's a lot of people that migrate to Florida with the intent of working there and sending money home. So for my part of the bank, acquiring branches in Florida was like gold. This is going to really drive our business up, right? So I was part of the team that was assigned to help, get the launch going on this, because our Express Send service, which is a money transfer service, would be the lead product when we rebranded all the Wachovia branches in Florida to Wells Fargo. Because of the population of immigrants, we wanted to be able to make a big deal about that. So I'm sitting in a staff meeting, we're talking about this, and the decision had been made to do our launch in Miami. Excuse me, in Miami. So we identified a branch in Miami, down here in southern Florida, where it would be the big deal. We would get the TV crew, we'd get the mayor out there to do a ribbon cutting on the rebranded branch. We'd make a big deal about this. We're talking about how we're going to do this in Miami. It's going to be huge because Miami, the city of Miami itself is like 80% immigrant or second generation. And it's almost entirely Hispanic or Spanish speaking in that region. There's other parts of the Miami area, people from Haiti and from people that speak French or Portuguese, but for the most part it's Spanish. So for us, this is where we're going to launch our product, right? And so my job is to help figure out how are we going to design marketing materials that are going to penetrate the market, that are going to be able to influence decision making to get people to adopt. Because to be able to send money home to your loved ones, it's important to you. You don't want to make a mistake. You don't want it to be done wrong, and you want to make sure that you're successful with it. And so one of the many factors we talked about was that the challenge, though, in Miami that I brought up in the staff meeting is that most of the people that live in Miami that send money home to places in the Caribbean and South America. Most of the immigrants that come to Miami come from South and from the East. Most of Wells Fargo's experience at this point with sending money was to Mexico, China, the Philippines, and India. We hadn't had a lot of experience sending money to this part of the world down here. So we were kind of going into a point where we were thinking maybe that our materials, the way we market our stuff, it would resonate the same for people that are of Spanish speakers that come from Cuba or Venezuela or Colombia, would resonate the same way as people that came from Mexico, El Salvador, or Guatemala. That's not the case. In any language group, you're going to have variations. Simply, some of the Spanish that I know, for example, would be that if you come from Mexico or Central America, if you're going to use the word small in conversation, you're probably going to use poquito. And if you're from South America, especially Caribbean, and you're going to use the word small to describe something, you're more likely to choose un poco, right? So these simple differences, it's not universal, but these simple differences will have impact when you're starting to figure out how to get people to buy things from you that are important to them, to send money to their loved ones. You're building that trust, right? You want to have that relationship to that level. So the demographics didn't favor this area. The marketing materials we were using didn't favor this area. So I raised my hand and I said, are we sure we want to launch in Miami? And everyone's like, well, yeah, we're locked in. We're already going. What are you talking about, Daniel? And I'm like, well, I told them exactly what I told you guys. And this happened all the time. Daniel has this great idea. He talks about all the data. Okay, whatever. But at that point, my boss had gotten used to the fact that I pretty good at what I did, and I knew what I was talking about. So if I was going to bring up this kind of point, I had a reason. So he pulled me aside at the end of the meeting. He says, okay, I get your point. I understand what you're saying, but you got to have the data to back it up. And most importantly, Daniel, as I've told you before, you have to have a solution when you bring up a problem, because nobody wants to just hear the problem, right? Right? So there you go. So early in my career, I learned that lesson finally for the last time. Always bring a solution when you have a problem. So I had to come up with a solution. So long story short, we launched in Orlando, not Miami. I convinced the top brass in the bank to make this change based on my analysis. My analysis said that if we launch in Orlando, where there's a lot more people from Central America and Mexico, we'll also be able to tap into the Tampa market, where there's a lot more people from Central America and Mexico, as compared to people from the Caribbean and South America. And combined, Orlando and Tampa is bigger than Miami. So I put together all the financials, put together all the proposals, did all that kind of stuff, launched it out there, and went and told people this whole thing. And I was able to convince it. We launched in Orlando. We had a great launch. We made a lot of money. Dan got a great bonus that year. It was all good for me. So that's an example of how I had to employ a technique called data storytelling to influence decision making, to be able to get change in my audience, which was the executives in the bank. This is the kind of ways you use data, and it has to be data that you've mined and you've figured out it's right, you refined it to be useful, you put it together in a narrative, and you present it in a way that influences decision making. That's data storytelling. That's the last thing I'll talk about as far as skill sets for you guys to think about. So now you have the presentation. Did you get a reply back already on the text to tell you that you got the PowerPoint?
Usually pretty good.
Yeah.
You did? Okay, so there should be a link to the PowerPoint. So you have that. I do have a book coming out soon. If you want to follow my book, you can find me on social media. I also have a digital package I put together, Artificial Intelligence 101. It's one of my products I do. And then I mentioned the trainings I do. I do trainings every quarter, either in Orlando or Las Vegas. And there's two reasons why I do it. One, I like going to Las Vegas, and I live in Orlando. But more importantly, this is what I think is cool. Do you know who two of the biggest users of artificial intelligence are when it comes to data mining in the world are? Disney. Disney's one, right? And the casino groups, the different casino groups in Vegas, they know their customers so well. You think about the loyalty programs in Vegas, the comps they give, the way they hook you to come back, that's all massive amounts of data they've mined and refined and are using to micro-target offers to individuals. That's Vegas. It's data-driven, incredibly data-driven. They have teams of analysts that do some amazing stuff, but they're nothing compared to Disney. Disney is the, I won't say the word, but when it comes to mining data, they create customer experiences, packages for their customers that are ridiculous, right? And they make a ton of money doing it. There's a reason Disney is so successful. They've managed to make fun profitable in a way that nobody else has. But they wouldn't have been able to do that without their ability to mine data. So
that's what's behind their whole, the way because these guys have perfected the customer experience.
They have.
Data mining is behind that?
Well, yeah, so you think about, all the surveys that they send out, all the feedback they get from customers, right? And we're talking, they have now they have like 2 parks in LA and 4 in Orlando and 2 in China and 1 in Japan, or 2 in Japan and 1 in Paris. I mean, they're looking at this in a global perspective. And then they know it sells. Every new ride they're building is a Marvel ride or a Star Wars ride, right? They launch these new Star Wars lands. They have a bunch of new Marvel stuff in production or going out there, because Marvel and Star Wars are the 2 most profitable brands under the Disney brand right now, right? So, and then they know what to do, and it's all data driven. They actually do a conference every year where their data engineers get out there and talk about the case studies that Disney does.
They're like selling an experience.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they know what experience you want. So if they're going to email you an offer, it's going to get you interested. It's not going to be like, oh, I would never do that.
There's memories behind it.
Right.
Family fun
Yeah,
time.
yeah, they're going to get you every time. So plus, like I said, Orlando and Vegas are fun places to have a training. If we're going to go there for a day, I might as well make fun of it. So that is my presentation. Thank you for your time. Now go out and mine some data.
Never heard that before.
Cool. Okay, so we have lunch.